some of the people from across the nation to try and raise issues and debate those that are pertinent to this cause. But today my speech is aimed at the Labour backbenches, because at the end of the day, regardless of what is said here, it's their decision, when there's 400 of them, who will decide what happens in this debate. And so I want to just gently highlight two parts. First of all, the standard set, and second of all, doubt. Now, the Prime Minister set very clear standards since he's been in Parliament. And it reminds me of the famous fable, The Fox and the Stork. Those of you not familiar with it will know that the fox invites the stork in to have dinner, and he serves soup. But mischievously, he serves soup in a flat plate, and of course the stork can't eat it. But the stork, not losing their temper, reciprocates and invites the fox back to have soup at their house. And when the stork serves the soup, serves it in a very long, thin glass. And of course the fox can't get to it and loses its temper. And the moral of that story is, the fable of that story is, treat others as you wish to be treated yourselves. And if we look at the process that the Prime Minister, the now Prime Minister, has taken, and of course the fox can't get, this is due process by the standards set by the Prime Minister. Half of that story is the fault to himself. And you only have to look at some of the tweets that he put out. The first one was back on January the 22nd. I quote, "The Prime Minister is a national distraction. Millions of people are struggling to pay the bills, but Boris Johnson and his government are spending the whole time mopping up their own rule breaching, sleaze and deceit. He must go. He's got to go." But then he follows it up from this dispatch box to the Prime Minister, stating, "There are only two possible explanations. Either he's trashing the ministerial code, or he's claiming he was repeatedly lied to by his own advisers and that he didn't know what was going on in his own office. Come off it." So this is the standard that the Prime Minister set himself before he became Prime Minister. And so is he following that standard? Well, we only have to see from other examples since the Prime Minister has been elected to see that he isn't. He gave passes to a donor to number 10. He took suits. He took glasses. He appointed a donor to the football regulator. And of course, when it came to freebies, he is the MP in the last Parliament that took the most freebies above and beyond even the 3 or 4 below him. So he set his own standard but doesn't seem to meet it. And that fits with the way in which he came into Parliament as well, because he said change, but he changed his promises. He said, "I would do things differently." And this is where I will agree, because when it came to a standards debate, as we've heard here, the last government said it was house business and didn't whip it. This government has made a change, and they're whipping it. The question is why? Which leads me on to my next point. We've talked about the standards. Now we need to talk about the doubt. I've heard today that some Labour MPs have no doubt in their mind about the Prime Minister. But I've equally heard other Labour MPs on that bench who do. And that's really, really important here. Because if you have no doubt, that's fine, vote against this motion. You're going to have to explain to your constituents exactly the decision you made and why, and live with that. That's what an MP does, and that's what an MP should do. But the Prime Minister himself clearly has doubt in his backbenchers. Because as we've heard, he's going to whip this. Why? If he's so confident that so many people would come to the conclusion that there was nothing to see here, he wouldn't need to whip it in the first place. But we know the real reason.
Running scared.
There are so many unanswered questions. A Labour MP is saying there's no chink of doubt. There's no question unanswered. They can explain the inconsistencies from the civil servant, why it's taken months to get this sorted, why it required humble addresses, emergency debates, and still 9 months on we're having these debates. Why were comments in the PM's box notes left empty. You see, I don't believe Labour MPs are going to show the same lack of curiosity that the Prime Minister showed when appointing Peter Mandelson, because they have a duty, and they know that, to their constituents, to make sure they get it right. How do I know all this, though? Well, because our side have been here before. Many of us on these benches are the remnants of what we had to go through. We've seen it. And the sort of hypocrisy I've talked about does cut both ways. And what did we learn last time? Well, it's the infection that gets you. And here we are 9 months on since I made that speech, and the infection is turning into sepsis. The patient is in real trouble. Which leads me towards the end, because at the end of the day, Labour MPs could learn from this side of the House, or they will share the same fate. You see, the Conservative Party is effectively a mirror to the Labour Party that they didn't ask for, but they'd be wise to study. And if they don't believe me, maybe they'll listen to a certain now Prime Minister back in the debate on the 21st of April 2022, who closed his speech by saying, "If we do not pass this motion and take this opportunity to restate the principles, we are all complicit in allowing the standard to slip. We are all complicit in allowing the public to think that we are all the same, that nobody tells the truth, and that there are alternative set of facts." That's what Labour MPs have to wrestle with. So I hope they listen to the now Prime Minister and his words back then.
Dr. Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll aim to be brief and to the point. Before I start, I'd like to pay tribute to the very moving, powerful and thoughtful speech by the Honourable Member for South Shields back at the beginning of this debate. I do not underestimate the bravery that it takes to stand up and speak out, and to all Labour colleagues who resist the whip with courage today, I recognise that and really welcome it and value it. Because what's at stake today is trust, honesty and integrity, issues that go to the core of what our politics should be about. And the behaviour of a Prime Minister who promised to restore honesty and integrity to government. And I agree with the Honourable Member for Nottingham East, who said, again very powerfully, that our constituents do care about honesty, truth, trust, integrity. Now, it's well known that I have many criticisms of the Prime Minister and this government, as do constituents across the country. Yes, he has repeatedly shown very poor judgment. Yes, he has betrayed the hopes of those who voted for real change in 2024. Yes, I am deeply frustrated that we are spending so much time, that we have to spend so much time debating these issues when there are pressing daily concerns of our constituents facing a cost of living crisis that we should be giving more attention to. And yes, I think he should resign. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. Our decision today is not even on whether the Prime Minister misled the House, still less to judge whether it was an intentional or reckless misleading. Our decision today is to decide whether the Prime Minister has a case to answer that he may have misled the House. And it is absolutely clear that there is a case to answer there. Let's look at the detail of the motion. It cites 3 quotes from the Prime Minister's own words. The first being his assurances about full due process being followed in the appointment of Peter Mandelson. And yet, just this morning, we've heard yet more evidence from Sir Philip Barton, the primary civil servant in the Foreign Office at the time, who was absolutely categorical that normal process is that vetting comes first and appointment comes later. It was the opposite way round in this case. The Prime Minister again, as the motion says, made clear that his position was that the position of Mandelson was subject to developed vetting and that no pressure whatsoever existed in relation to this case. This is clearly not a tenable position. Now, some colleagues on the government benches have tried to claim that although it's perfectly clear that there was considerable pressure put on the timescale within the context of an already announced appointment of Peter Mandelson, within the context of there being absolutely no contingency plan for if the vetting process failed him, within the context that it would have been a complete foreign affairs crisis for that vetting process to have failed in. Those colleagues are asking us to believe that there was still no pressure whatsoever on the process. This is clearly, the honourable gentleman has said a lot today and there are others still waiting to speak. It is clear that there is a case to answer here. That is the decision we have to make. Not whether the Prime Minister, not whether we're definitively certain that the Prime Minister misled the House, but whether we feel that there is a case to be answered, and thus this matter should be referred to the body that is in existence to deal with these issues, the Privileges Committee. Now, as many members across the House have already commented, the Prime Minister could and should refer himself to that committee. That would save a great deal of heartache, clearly, within the Labour Party. But if he will not do that, all of us, whatever our party, owe it to our consciences and to our constituents to refer him to the Privileges Committee and to vote for this motion.
Hear, hear. Christopher Chope.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to be able to participate in this very important debate. And I'm going to add a perspective from somebody who has never been in the Whip's office, but has witnessed the dark arts of the Whips in my time in this place. And I can see that what is happening today is that the Prime Minister has been persuaded by his Whips to put on a demand that all his troops should support him in voting down this motion, the consequence of which is that he will be even more unpopular, the results for Labour in the local elections will be even worse, and that as a result it will be easier for the Labour Party and its whips to be able to scapegoat the Prime Minister for their failures. And so it will then be easier for them to change their leader, which is what a lot of them are yearning to be able to do. If the Prime Minister referred himself or this motion was not being contested, then what would happen is that the Prime Minister, as many of my honourable and right honourable friends have said, would have the opportunity to go before the Privileges Committee, explain himself, and even if some of the allegations were proved to be true, in my view, Madam Deputy Speaker, the penalty would not be that severe. And I can remember at the time of the 1997 general election, when Margaret Thatcher came down to support me in Christchurch, that was the same day that one of our colleagues who was standing in another constituency was condemned by the then Standards Committee for having been in breach of the rules of the House. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, the first thing that the former Prime Minister had to contend with when she arrived in Christchurch was, what do you think of Neil Hamilton? And she had what I thought was the perfect answer. She said, nobody's perfect. And obviously, when you answer a question like this, it's very hard to put any supplementaries in. And despite the press's best efforts, they weren't able to get anywhere further. And then they had to start talking about the Conservative prospects of winning back the Christchurch constituency in that election. But I think that if this matter was referred to the Privileges Committee, then ultimately the effect would be that somebody would say, well, nobody's perfect. They've got a Prime Minister who uses words which to exaggerate a situation by such as whatsoever. And whatsoever, one looks it up in the dictionary, is really to reinforce the strength of the proposition, that there'd be no pressure whatsoever. And so in using that word, I suspect, no, I'm not going to give way because I think we need to make progress in it. So the effect of using that word was to, I think, probably inadvertently mislead himself. I'm being generous. But what I'm really saying to members opposite is watch out. You are probably working very well together to bring down the downfall of this Prime Minister. And what I would say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that my constituents would be delighted if there was a general election and a chance to change the government. But the last thing they want is to get rid of this Prime Minister and be faced with another Prime Minister from the Labour Party who they think will be far worse, even though they might be more effective. So that's my small contribution to this evening, but I hope that it may influence the way in which some of the members opposite choose to vote.
Sarah Ball.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister came to this very dispatch box and said that no pressure existed whatsoever in relation to this Mandelson case. Now, I recall our late Majesty famously saying recollections may vary, but even for the Prime Minister, I really think that's stretching that phrase given the evidence that we have from Ollie Robbins and others. Now, recently, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was reading Black Box Thinking, a book by Matthew Said, which at its heart was talking about the importance of learning from failure and using that to improve. And in some respects, I think the Prime Minister believes that he has done all that is necessary by changing the process for appointments. But the Prime Minister is really missing the point. The issue is what has, or rather what has not been done, and what the Prime Minister told this House about, what he told the House about, whether this was misleading and whether it amounts to a contempt of the House, bearing in mind the standards expected of ministers as set out in the Ministerial Accountability and Ministerial Code. So this is not just an innocent mistake. The phrase, "the cover-up is worse than the crime," is really resonating with me at this moment, although I think the crime is equally heinous. And on the cover-up, now despite the member for Bolton's protestations, I notice he's not in his place, so I think he's probably tired himself out, to which I'd say brevity is the soul of wit. I simply say due process was not followed, despite the Prime Minister stating otherwise to the House. The security vetting was not carried out before Mandelson's appointment. The Foreign Office had to act at pace to confirm the appointment. Pressure was applied so that there would be an appointment before the inauguration. And as the member for Bridgington and the Walls has said in the House earlier, no minutes or records are kept of a key meeting from December 2024. This is a drip feed of constant information, and eventually, like dams, it will burst. And we're waiting for this to come out. Now, on the crime itself, this is really a question of judgment. Alarm bells should have been ringing. We all in this House knew about the Prince of Darkness. I mean, I was 10 years old when he was first dismissed. I was 13 years old when he was dismissed for his links with the Hinduja case. Again, I grew up knowing the background about Lord Peter Mandelson. And then it comes out about his links with Russia, his links with China, which is a national security risk, let alone we're talking about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And all of this was brushed aside in a rush to appoint this man as our ambassador. Now, I'm sorely disappointed that members opposite are going to be made by being whipped to allow him not to go before the Privileges Commission. Because if he has no case to answer, then he has absolutely nothing to hide. The prosecutor is only prepared to ask questions, he's not prepared to answer any. And I am sorry that some of the Labour MPs have had to come before us and say they are scared about what will happen next for speaking out against this. This is not what we should be aiming for in this House. Yeah. This is all about today, this privilege motion, about the House and its reputation, And I feel that the Prime Minister is under a duty to answer the questions. And the Privileges Commission is a perfect mechanism by which to bring certainty on the procedure and what has been said to this House. This House has a long and distinguished history. And this, using the Privileges Committee, is all part of preserving that history and the respect that people have for the mother of all parliaments. And it is above party allegiances. He, the Prime Minister, would save his MPs if only he would refer himself to the Privileges Committee.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a pleasure to take part in this debate. And I do, as many colleagues on this side of the House have referenced, it brings back déjà vu, rather kind of horrible chill up my spine, remembering being on that side of the House and being pushed by the whips in certain directions to vote for certain things. And here we have a Prime Minister, and it's already been said, but who promised to do things differently, to promise change, promised higher standards, promised transparency, and is the ultimate arbiter and keeper of the ministerial code. And yet, week after week, if politics is often about a certain amount of deflection, but seems to go beyond all past precedent in not answering questions and drives the Speaker up the wall to the point where they actually have altercations in the chamber. So there's that as a backdrop. So we have a Prime Minister who promised he would be particularly transparent, was in fact going to bring a duty of candour law forward before that was dropped, who promised higher standards and yet doesn't live up to it. And even the most, and we have some of them, I mean, we have the new trade envoy to Korea. Fabulous to see that loyalty can be rewarded. The honourable member for Rugby is in the chamber. Well done. So for those who think there can be a reward for backing the government, even when possibly you shouldn't, there can be reward for it. But as colleagues on this side of the chamber have said, if you don't vote with your conscience, if you don't do the right thing when your gut tells you to, you will regret it. And there's a particular change in today, because on this matter, which is a House matter, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman in a moment, on a House matter, to have a three-line whip on this. When the members who've spoken on behalf of the government line, one in his seat said he didn't think the three-line whip was a good idea, the others didn't want to answer on it. But who was the three-line whip for? Perhaps the Prime Minister's Chief Secretary can tell us, because the members opposite are telling us they would always vote with a conscience and they would always do the right thing. And yet, after the whips had phoned round, it was decided that they must impose a three-line whip. Now, it could be my honourable friend, who's never been a whip and hasn't much fondness for them, has put the ghastly deed at their door. Well, as a former whip myself, I tend to think it's more likely the whips did their job. They gave a nuanced but properly informed answer. And then number 10, sitting there in their bunker, panicking, their only job to keep the Prime Minister in place, make sure he's not replaced. They said, no, unless you can give us 100%. Well, there's no such thing as 100%, the Chief Whip would reply. No, I insist that there be a three-line whip imposed, and that happened. But the honourable lady, who's a brilliant tennis player and great partner, will forgive me if I give way to the honourable gentleman who I referenced, and I therefore should allow to come in.
Thank the honourable gentleman. I like the honourable gentleman a great deal, and I thank him for his kind words. The moment's somewhat past, but he was implying that the Prime Minister is avoiding answering questions. But this is, if you listen, this is the Prime Minister who came before the House last Monday and answered questions from honourable and right honourable members for 2.5 hours. And the honourable gentleman spoke about transparency. This is the Prime Minister who led a government that is releasing all of the documents before this House and the public. So you can talk all you like about transparency. The right honourable gentleman can talk all he likes about transparency and answering questions. I've just demonstrated that both of those things have been achieved already.
Well, the honourable gentleman, as so often, does two things brilliantly. One, he reinforces his merit in terms of the whips and future position on that side, and yet makes our case for us. Yeah, dragged before the House. It's not me. The Speaker was falling out with him, and the Speaker is formerly a Labour MP. It's just the frustration of a whole nation at a man who promised he'd be open and transparent, who can't. ever just give a straightforward answer. It's got to the point if he was asked whether he'd like mash or new potatoes, he'd say to his wife, he'd start talking about pork chops. He just can't answer the question. And when he is dragged here, I'd say to the honourable member for Rugby, and that's what the issue today, he misled this House. And we've gone over it, I won't go over it all over again, you'll be deeply relieved, but he said that due process had been followed. We know that, and we had evidence today, didn't we? Morgan McSweeney said, oh, he interviewed. He's an old pal of Mandelson's. He was championing, he was the man pushing for Mandelson's appointment, and he's the guy who asked Mandelson the questions, and then, whoa, let's review the answers that he got. Oh, let's get now Lord Doyle, another pal of both of them, to provide the independent review. That is what the Prime Minister presided over, all in order to deliver what McSweeney also made very clear today was absolutely the Prime Minister's decision. He made the decision. He got his mates in this crony boys club to sit around and review each other and then put Mandelson into place. And then he came here, and that's the point, and said that due process was followed. Due process was not followed. We know only because, and again the government had to give way halfway through the debate because it could see the direction it was going, only because of the humble address have we found out that the official advice to the Prime Minister, the official advice from the Cabinet Secretary was that you must, if you're going to have a political appointee, you must do the vetting before you announce it. That was there. And this effort, and that wasn't in the public domain when Chris Wormald, who will have to answer for his own judgments himself, came out and said, oh, well, due process was followed. But quite clearly, to anyone who could read that advice and see what happened, it wasn't followed. So Chris Wormald's letter was false and wrong, and claiming it as the great defence of the Prime Minister, I don't see how you square it. And we've had no answers to that. So we've got so many questions. That's even before we get to last week, as the Honourable Gentleman says the Prime Minister was here. But under that questioning, he, and from my right honourable friend who does a brilliant job of keeping her temper while he evades and seeks not to answer, he said there was no pressure whatsoever. Now, quite clearly that's not true when Ollie Robbins repeatedly said how much pressure there was. So there are plenty of reasons to believe that the Prime Minister, who said he was going to set a higher standard, has misled this House. That's all we need, as the Speaker said. We're not judge and jury today whether he did mislead the House. That's why we have this a Privileges Committee to look at it. It's dominated by Labour MPs, and such is the lack of confidence in Number 10, perhaps in the Whip's office, certainly in the Cabinet, for this Prime Minister, that not only does this Prime Minister not trust the Labour MPs on that committee, it doesn't even trust all the members opposite who are being dragooned into voting for something with a three-line whip when no such whip should ever be applied.
Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start with a clumsy metaphor. And if you're in public, not you, if one is in public office, having anything to do with Lord Mandelson is akin to filling the world's smallest hot water bottle with the world's largest kettle, dressed only in your shorts and your flip-flops. The question isn't whether you'll get burned. The question is how badly you'll get burned, and potentially how fatally one could get burned having anything to do with Peter Mandelson. And one of the falsehoods that the Prime Minister has sought repeatedly to advance is that this was a mistake. It was a mistake to appoint Peter Mandelson. It was no such thing. It was a debt to be repaid. He had to appoint Peter Mandelson to that job. It was a deal he made with the devil. It was a high-stakes political game of Russian roulette. And the Prime Minister pulled the trigger when the bullet was in the chamber, and it went off at the heart of his government. And now they've got, through the noise of the bang, they're all suffering from some sort of collective cognitive dissonance where they can't see what a preposterous defence the Prime Minister and the Labour Party have mounted. I'll frame the rest of what I've got to say around honesty, integrity and respect. On honesty, the PM's version of events is inconsistent with the evidence in its greater or lesser part than that which has been proffered by officials. That much is clear. That in itself is enough to seek recourse to the Privileges Committee. The Prime Minister's evidence consistently sought to omit that this was a catastrophe of his own making for the reasons that I've set out, insofar as it was political payback. These are the detriments and demerits against the Prime Minister on the honesty front, but I can't be the arbiter of that. On integrity, he made this happen, as we've discussed. It's his mess. But he has inflicted substantial damage to politics across these islands. Many of us are campaigning in elections at the minute, and most of us will realise people don't care which party you are in when they've lost trust in politics. It's a plague on all of our houses, and that plague is now substantially more fatal because of the actions of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister was but what? Does somebody want to intervene on me? No, I didn't think so. The Prime Minister was but one of 5 actors involved in this debacle, and all the other 4 actors have lost their jobs, while the Prime Minister, for the time being so far, keeps his. And I want to touch briefly on the whipping scenario. I won't go over the ground that people have said already, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is deeply questionable about the conviction of backbenchers in their Prime Minister, or conversely, the conviction of Prime Minister in his backbenchers, that they've whipped this vote. But to be clear, notwithstanding the very brave speech given by the Honourable Member for South Shields and others, I'm prepared to believe that there are Labour MPs over there who will go through the no lobby tonight and vote against this motion in good conscience on the basis of the evidence as they see, and that's fine. The problem they've got is they've been whipped to do it, whether that's their position or not, and they should be absolutely furious about that. But I can't be the arbiter of that. And on respect, finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, the appointment was a mistake. No, the Prime Minister must take responsibility. Officials and SPADs have all had to walk the walk while he remains in post, looking increasingly like a cuckoo waiting for his successor to arrive. And on respect, the most important thing on respect is when he stands there and he says that he's sorry to the victims of Epstein. What he should continue to say is that when I appointed him to the pinnacle of diplomatic appointments within the United Kingdom over in Washington, I appointed him in the knowledge that he was a sympathiser and close friend and confidant of the world's most prolific paedophile, and I still appointed him. I just didn't know how much of a friend and a confidant he was of the world's most prolific paedophile. That is no defence, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know that. I'm surprised the former Director of Public Prosecutions doesn't know that that's the shallowest of all defences. And in closing, I will say that many members opposite have talked about how often and how many hours the Prime Minister has spent in this chamber fielding questions. Well, very, very few of them were actually answered. And but for the Leader of the Opposition, nobody gets a right to reply to the questions the Prime Minister serially doesn't answer about the appointment of Peter Mandelson. So recourse to the Petitions Committee is what we need to see here. All the things I've said, I can't be the arbiter of that, and neither can anyone else in here, but the Privileges Committee can.
Ben Obsejecti.
Why does the Prime Minister think everybody else's actions have consequences except his own? A question the country would like an answer to, a prescient question given the appearance of several recently defenestrated senior civil servants. But it isn't my question, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's the Prime Minister's own question from 2022, and how hollow those words must feel now. The testimonies from Sir Oliver Robbins last week and by his predecessor Philip Barton and the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney this morning, all casualties trailing in the wake of a Prime Minister who will stop at nothing to save his own skin, to torpedo what last vestiges of credibility the Prime Minister is desperately clinging on to. The Prime Minister set the conditions for Peter Mandelson to be the UK ambassador to the United States with a devil-may-care attitude to the consequences. The public announcement of his appointment in December 2024, His Majesty the King being informed, agreement with the United States being secured, all before vetting had taken place, ensured that the appointment was a fait accompli. Peter Mandelson then being granted access to the FCDO building and higher classification briefings before he was granted his developed vetting is a shockingly lax approach to our national security. It is not one without precedent, though. We saw much the same laissez-faire attitude with the previous ministerial appointment, that of the Prime Minister's Special Envoy to the British Indian Ocean Territory, Jonathan Powell. A similar pattern: access to the FCDO granted, access to classified documents, use of unsecure email for communications, question marks over potential foreign influence, all confirmed to have taken place prior to his developed vetting within the last few hours by Morgan McSweeney. Only this was 6 months prior to the Mandelson farrago. As I said at PMQs last week, playing fast and loose with national security is a key characteristic of the Prime Minister's chumocracy. The question of Mandelson's security clearance itself asks a host more questions. When Peter Mandelson commenced his role, he had already been given developed vetting, although UKSV had highlighted concerns. That's now well established. But if full due process was followed, why was Ollie Robbins sacked? On the 4th of February, less than a week before Mandelson started his role, the Appointments and Interchange Officer of the FCDO informed him via email that the role also required STRAP in addition to DV, and that a new STRAP application would need to be made. So Oliver Robbins confirmed that it was clear to him that he had received STRAP clearance from the STRAP authorities. In the chamber during the statement on the 16th of March, I asked the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister there in his place what level of security clearance Mandelson had been granted. Notwithstanding the minutiae of whether developed vetting is a clearance level and STRAP as a role-specific access, the reply I received from the Minister for the Indo-Pacific, somewhat conveniently 1 hour after The Guardian broke its story, only stated that Mandelson had developed vetting upon commencement of his role on the 10th. So when was his STRAP application made, and when was it granted? I asked the Prime Minister last week, and despite his legendary forensic eye for detail, he had no idea. Did the intelligence services also have access to the UKSV vetting report? The wider question is also what assessment the US intelligence services made of Peter Mandelson. Did he pass vetting by the US State Department? As the nexus for all Five Eyes intelligence and US-UK eyes-only intelligence coming from the United States, was Mandelson granted access to all the available intelligence in order to discharge all his responsibilities as ambassador? Would the US, for example, have given him visibility of TK-level imagery? What assessment has the government now made of the damage this debacle has done to the UK relationship with the United States? It is surely no coincidence that this special relationship has soured at the same time as this fiasco has unravelled, quite aside from the other faux pas the government have made in recent weeks. Even more damning as Sir Ollie Robbins' testimony was the Prime Minister's dogged determination to reward the now Lord Doyle. I was under strict instructions not to discuss that with the then Foreign Secretary, which was uncomfortable. I found it very hard to think how I could explain to the office what the credentials of Matthew were to be an important head of mission role, when I was in danger of making very senior, very experienced diplomats leave office. The fact that the Prime Minister put pressure on the FCDO to give Lord Doyle a head of mission role in the diplomatic service in March last year, despite his complete lack of qualification for the role, owing for that same individual to later have the Labour whip removed, owing to his relationship with Sean Morton, a man subsequently convicted of possessing indecent images of children, the Prime Minister very deliberately directed that that information was withheld from the then Foreign Secretary, although I suspect that that's not the first time he's done that. Two men with proximity to convicted paedophiles, both Labour peers, both key figures in the Starmer project. This government's cronyism is second only to its nepotism. And knowing what we know about the role that Peter Mandelson played in the last reshuffle, what confidence can the general public have that ministers who owe their careers to Peter Mandelson would vote honestly in this coming vote? It isn't on this side of the House that we have to worry about whether Peter Mandelson paid for anybody's wedding. The laissez-faire attitude to Peter Mandelson's appointment has illustrated the nonchalance, arrogance and incompetence of the government under this milquetoast premiership. There's a key question we come back to once again. Why does the Prime Minister think everybody else's actions have consequences except his own? The public must be assured that there has been an investigation into whether the Prime Minister misled the House. The Privileges Committee must investigate the Prime Minister, and Labour MPs must vote for this motion, for transparency and truth, not the defence of a Prime Minister who doesn't deserve their blinkered loyalty.
Ayub Khan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first of all extend my thoughts and prayers to the victim of Epstein. Can I also commend the bold and courageous contributions by the honourable members that sat opposite, which will be voting with the motion. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was elected as an independent Member of Parliament to represent the people of Birmingham Perry-Barr without fear and without favour. I was sent here without a party whip, without shackles, controls, or indeed hidden notes given to me behind closed doors. I was sent here to exercise my judgment, my discretion, and my conscience at the behest of my constituents. And that is exactly what I do each and every day. Because the truth is, the British public feel deeply, profoundly disenfranchised. Too many people no longer trust politicians. Too many believe that we say one thing and do another. Too many people feel that there is one rule for those in power and another rule for everyone else. And we cannot simply dismiss this sentiment. We must confront it. Honesty matters, integrity matters, credibility matters, and above all, transparency matters. Because without these fundamental elements, public confidence does not just weaken, it disappears. And once it's gone, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. So I ask colleagues across this House, especially those colleagues that sit opposite, what message do we send today if we refuse even to allow a committee to examine the facts? What are we saying to the public if we block scrutiny before it has even begun? This motion is not a verdict. It's not a judgment. It's not a declaration of guilt. It's a process, a fair, established parliamentary process to examine evidence, to determine the facts, and to allow the truth to emerge. And yet we are told that members on the Labour benches are under a three-line whip. For those outside this chamber who may not know, that means they are being instructed, compelled to vote against this motion, to vote against even allowing the question to be examined. So let us be honest about what that looks like. If an individual votes to prevent this investigation, they are not defending due process. They are denying it. They are not upholding transparency. They are obstructing it. And they are not strengthening public trust. They are further eroding it. Because to the British people, it will look like they are shielding. It will look like blocking. It will look like protecting the powerful from scrutiny. And that is precisely the perception we should all be fighting against, not reinforcing. If we expect the public to follow the rules, to respect the law, and to have faith in our institutions, then we must hold ourselves to the same, if not higher standards. We cannot ask for trust while refusing accountability. We cannot demand integrity while avoiding scrutiny. And we cannot rebuild confidence by closing ranks. This is a moment that calls for courage, not partisan courage, but moral courage. The courage to say, let the process take its course. The courage to say, no one is above scrutiny. And the courage to put principle above party. As an independent member, I answer only to my constituents and to my conscience. And I'm confident that every member that sat opposite and their conscience too tells me that supporting this motion is the right thing to do. Not because of politics, not because of just principles, not because of personalities, but because the standards we owe to the British public. So I urge colleagues across this House, particularly those under instructions today, to reflect carefully on the message your vote will send. Will it be a message of openness, or will it be a message of obstruction? Will it be a message of accountability, or a message of avoidance? Because the public are watching, and they will draw their own conclusions. Mr. Speaker, if we are serious about restoring trust in politics, then we must be serious about transparency. If we are serious about integrity, then we must be serious about scrutiny. And if we are serious about public confidence, then we must allow the truth to be examined, wherever that truth leads. And for that reason, I support this motion. And finally, can I say this? The Prime Minister is willing to put each and every member of Parliament of his political party at risk at the next general election, but he will not risk himself going in front of this privileged committee. Thank you.
Shadow Secretary of State Alex Burkhardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It has been a long and sometimes interesting debate. We have had some revelations. I was very interested to hear the speech by the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I'm sure we will all be delighted to hear that the Liberal Democrats are now opposed to sanctimony. I was also interested to hear from the Father of the House that he's not particularly political. And I welcome the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister back to his place. I congratulate him on the fact that the Today programme this morning he was being lauded as the Prime Minister's right-hand man. I hope that you will be not made too anxious by what's happened to all of the other Prime Minister's right-hand men. And,
he is smiling. He is smiling.
The motion before us today is very, very simple. The motion before us today is about starting a process which will take what is being discussed in this House and put it in the hands of a group, a committee of our peers who will get to adjudicate because there is no agreement on these points. This is the process that has long existed in this House to resolve issues such as these. We're doing this for a reason. It is simply because... Come on. Come on. We're doing this for a reason. It is because members of all parties, believe that there is reason to believe that the Prime Minister may have misled this House. And so those Labour MPs who stood up and said, to the horror of the Liberal Democrats so sanctimoniously, that this was some sort of political stunt, OK, all right. Do they think that the Honourable Lady from South Shields was part of a political stunt? Yeah, exactly. Do they think that she was part of a political stunt when she said, good, decent colleagues will be complicit in a cover-up? When she said, it is a matter for privileges, was she part of a political stunt? Was it all about the local elections for her? When the Honourable Lady from Lagan Valley stood up and explained that she has no Labour opponent, she doesn't have any local elections, was she part of a political stunt? Was the Honourable Gentleman not in his place at the moment, the member for Kingston upon Hull East, when he stood up and said that he doesn't believe the House was misled by the Prime Minister, but he does think that the Prime Minister should be referred to the committee. Was he part of a political stunt? This falls away at the first hurdle. Exactly. What is going on here is a political objection because the Labour Party knows that the Prime Minister may well be in the wrong and they are scared of referring him. And that's the only reason. That's the only reason they need to put down a hard three-line whip and start twisting arms. Do they really believe that the member for Grangemouth was part of a political stunt? The member for Bradford East was a part of a political stunt? The member for Clapham, who's absent, who's tweeted that if she was here, she would be voting for this motion. They think she's part of a political stunt? No. As my right honourable friend from Belfast East said at the start of this debate, if the government has nothing to hide, it has nothing to fear from the procedure committee. Now, a number of Labour MPs have objected, saying that they think the Prime Minister is innocent, and they're perfectly entitled to make that case. We think that case is wrong, which is why, as my honourable friend from Gordon Buchan elegantly pointed out, that is why we need the Privilege Committee to adjudicate. A number of Labour MPs thought that the Prime Minister should have referred himself. Indeed, he should have done. It would have been the simplest way of moving this whole process on without any further need for the House to agonise over it. And those Labour MPs who stood up and said how sad it was that they couldn't debate all the other things they wanted to debate today, they could have done if the Prime Minister had referred himself. The case, which has been well trodden this afternoon, I will make again very briefly, is on 2 points. It's on full due process and it's on pressure. And on full due process, we know, because of the humble address, and only because of the humble address, a point made elegantly by my friend from Beverley, that Simon Case, the then Cabinet Secretary, set out in November 2024 what full due process looked like. That the Prime Minister's appointee had to have security clearance before he was appointed, and he had to declare his interests before he was appointed. So far, the government, despite being asked on very many occasions whether Peter Mandelson filled in a conflict of interest document, have been unable to tell us. Did not release it in the humble address and have not been able to tell us whether such a document even exists. And on the case of security clearance, well, we know that this wasn't followed. We know that the Prime Minister immediately went ahead and made the appointment anyway, despite the fact that he had been told by the Cabinet Secretary that he should not do this. But look, there are plenty of other reasons why we know that full due process wasn't followed. It doesn't require any great experience of government to know that full due process does not include reading a due diligence document by the Cabinet Office which tells you that Peter Mandelson was a director of a Russian company during the Russian invasion of Crimea, and then think, well, we just did security clearance later. That's obviously not full due process. It's not full due process to ask Peter Mandelson's Labour Together friends to complete the clearance process for him. It's obviously not due process. And it's not due process to not keep any records of any meetings, of any calls, of any decisions in a way that is clearly in violation of all of the guidance given to civil servants. This in no way was full due process following. Those people who have nobly stood up and tried to make a case that Wormald, the later Cabinet Secretary, said it was all done fine. Let us remind the House that Wormald's letter to the Prime Minister was written on the 16th of September. By that time, the Prime Minister had already told the House that full due process was followed. The system was trying to defend a position that the Prime Minister had already made very clear in the House repeatedly. And at that point, at that moment in time, on the 10th of December, when he told my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, that full due process had been followed, the last piece of advice given to him by a Cabinet Secretary was from Simon Case. He knew that he had not followed full due process. On the point of pressure, that, I'm afraid, it's also very clear that the Prime Minister, at the very least, misspoke in the House last Wednesday. The Prime Minister said yesterday, he said that Sir Ollie Robbins went on to say, I'm quoting at this point, I have complete confidence that recommendations to me and the discussion we had and the decision we made were rigorously independent of any pressure. But what Sir Ollie actually said to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee was, I also have complete confidence that their recommendations to me and the discussion we had and the decision we made were rigorously independent of that pressure. There's a difference between no pressure and there being pressure. Sir Ollie, as he made very clear throughout his whole testimony, was put under pressure. He and his office were put under pressure. And when the Prime Minister said, and I quote again, Sir Ollie was absolutely clear that nobody put pressure on him to make this appointment, that is manifestly false. Because what he actually said was throughout January, honestly, my office and the Foreign Secretary's office were under constant pressure. Again, he said, while I think the department felt under pressure, we were proud of the fact that we had not bowed to that pressure. And he also said that he was very clear that he found an atmosphere where this was not just, please get this done quickly, but get it done. That was, I think, pretty clear. Yeah, it deserves to be said loudly because it's important, because the Prime Minister appears to have misled the House and not corrected the record. And under the Ministerial Code, as everyone knows, a minister sometimes makes mistakes, but they have to come and correct the record at the earliest available opportunity. The earliest available opportunity was Thursday. We could have probably squeezed it to Monday, but it is Tuesday, and the Prime Minister is still pretending that he has done nothing wrong, even though it is here in black and white for everyone to read. There is clearly a case to answer. There is clearly a case to answer, Mr. Speaker. And I have sympathy for all those Labour MPs who have spoken in this debate, who have deep concerns and grievances about this. And I also have a very great deal of sympathy with those who feel the same way but haven't spoken. The Prime Minister's failure to self-refer, as several Labour MPs have suggested, has put them in this position. And they are being whipped to support something that they know is wrong. They are being whipped to support something they know their constituents will hate. They are being whipped to defend the Labour Together machine, which has brought such shame on the Labour Party. You've all taken money from them, so you can get angry. You've all taken money from them. Well, not all of you, to be fair. There are some honourable members opposite who are calling for an investigation into Labour Together, and quite rightly so. And they are being whipped by a Prime Minister who will lead them over the edge of the cliff if they let him. As my right honourable friend from Herne Bay said very powerfully, it is important in politics at the end of the day to be able to look yourself in the eye. And I know that there will be many Labour MPs who are going through the lobbies tonight who will struggle to do that. They don't need to. They all know how this ends. Where this ends is with the Prime Minister not fighting the next general election. They all know where this ends. It ends with them having then to justify what they've done. They then are left only with what is left of their reputations.
Yeah. Secretary Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I just begin by saying that the comments from the honourable member in his final speech, not least at the beginning, where he visibly enjoyed his jokes more than the rest of us in this House, shows that for them on that side of the House, this is purely a joking matter. But we take this seriously, Mr. Speaker, and so I will speak to the substance and the motivations of the motion that's before the House today. Before I do so, can I thank all right honourable and honourable members for their contributions to the debate. I would particularly like to thank honourable friends and other members who reminded us, as they should, that the victims of Jeffrey Epstein suffered the most hideous abuse and will be reminded of that every single time this matter is debated. The Prime Minister has apologised to them and expressed his ongoing regret for having appointed Peter Mandelson in the first place, which he knows is at the heart of this matter. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and indeed the whole government recognise the importance of transparency in respect to Peter Mandelson's appointment and dismissal as ambassador. This is why this is my 8th appearance at the dispatch box to provide updates on these issues, and why the government welcomes the opportunity today to debate the substance of the motion before us. Can I also recognise the diligence of this House's select committees to pay tribute to the work of my right honourable friend, the member for Islington South, and the members of her committee for the important work that she is leading on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Members from across the House will have heard the evidence from a number of officials and the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff as part of that ongoing work in this Parliament. I would also like to thank the honourable member for North Dorset as Chair of the Public Administration Committee and the members of the Intelligence and Security Committee for their support in providing additional layers of transparency and accountability as the government complies with the humble address. Mr. Speaker, moving to today's motion from the Leader of the Opposition. I won't. In recent weeks, Mr. Speaker, I will happily give way in due course, but I want to turn to the substance of the motion first. In recent weeks, Mr. Speaker, some have accused the Prime Minister of dishonesty, saying there was no way that Foreign Office officials would have given Peter Mandelson's clearance against the vetting agency's recommendation, let alone without checking with the Prime Minister himself. The Leader of the Opposition herself on BBC Radio 4 said he knew, and I quote, that I know he is lying. But the testimony provided by Sir Ollie Robbins has disproved those accusations without further question. So rather than focus on the issues affecting our constituents and the country's most, what do the opposition benches do? They try to shift the goalposts and have tried again and again to make their arguments fit.
Today alone, Mr. Speaker, we have heard members of opposite bounce from one accusation to another in a desperate search for something that will stick.
Keep getting it wrong.
And we have been subjected, Mr. Speaker, to the ranting incoherence of the Leader of the Opposition, where she's in search of something that she could use to justify today's politically motivated spectacle. I think we've heard enough, Mr. Speaker, of the ranting incoherence of the leadership of the opposition. So let's take the specific allegations in turn. First, Mr. Speaker, as to whether the Prime Minister was correct when he said full due process was followed. Yesterday, the government deposited a letter from the then Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold, into the library of the House. In that letter, it is clear he was specifically asked by the Prime Minister to review whether due process was followed in the appointment. He confirmed it was. Last week, the former permanent Under-Secretary at the Foreign Office, Sir Ollie Robbins, stated to the Foreign Affairs Committee that his department followed that process. We have also heard the Cabinet Office Permanent Secretary's evidence, which covered this issue in great detail. Catherine Little stated unequivocally that due process was followed in relation to Peter Mandelson's vetting. I give way.
Thank you. I thank him for giving way. Would not full due process have required the vetting to be completed before announcing the appointment as advised by the then Cabinet Secretary and ignored or overruled by the Prime Minister personally?
The Right Honourable Gentleman should listen to my speech, Mr. Speaker. I have just said that Catherine Little, Sir Chris Wormold and Sir Ollie Robbins all agree on the point that due process was followed. When the Prime Minister received new information about the UKSV process this month, he immediately asked for the full facts to be established, and he then came to this House on the 20th of April. And, Mr. Speaker, on the statement that Peter Mandelson's appointment was subject to developed vetting, the Prime Minister has always been clear that this appointment was in line with the processes at the time. I understand there have been some questions about this process, but to be clear, as Sir Ollie Robbins told the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in November, and I'm quoting, "As is normally the case with external appointments to my department, the appointment was made subject to obtaining security clearance." As Sir Chris Wormold told the same committee, and again I quote, "The normal thing is for the security clearance to happen after appointment, but before the person signs a contract and takes up post." And as the former Cabinet Secretary said in his letter to the Prime Minister, having conducted a review into the process, and I quote again, "The vetting process was complete before the previous HMA Washington took up post on 10th of February 2025, and it is more usual for security vetting to happen after appointment." I'll give way.
Can I thank the Minister for giving way? Clearly, he believes that he has a defensible position. So will the Minister support the withdrawal of the whip against the backbenchers?
I'm not going to answer silly questions, Mr. Speaker. Next, Mr. Speaker, on the question of pressure. On the question of pressure, because many members on these benches, many members have asked questions today about a general pressure or a specific pressure or a variety of different pressures, so they may want to listen to the answer. It is important to be clear about this because there is pressure. There is pressure to get stuff done every day across every area of government as we work hard to deliver for the British people. The Leader of the Opposition and other members who had previously served in government will no doubt recall this from their time in office. But there is clearly a difference between asking for progress updates and putting pressure on officials to predetermine an outcome or not to follow a proper process. That was not the case in this scenario.
Is it due process to make a public announcement of an appointment before vetting is completed? And is it not the case that having made a public announcement, the government created pressure on the process?
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying my best, but I've just answered both of those questions already from the dispatch box. I refer the Honourable Lady to her comments. I'll finish this section, and then I'll come to the Honourable Lady, the Right Honourable Lady. And as Sir Philip Barton told the committee this morning, and I quote, during my tenure, I was not aware of any pressure on the substance of the Mandelson DV case. I give way.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister really just one question in my speech. Will he repeat on the floor of the House the exact words that the Prime Minister used at PMQs in front of all of us, that no pressure whatsoever was put on the Foreign Office?
It's an important question, Mr. Speaker. It is an important question because it's going to the very heart of the motion before the House today. I'm going to just, rest your horses. It is important. It is important to place the Prime Minister's words in the right context. When the Prime Minister's, Mr. Speaker, they don't want to listen to the answer again. They don't like the facts, but I'm going to try my best. They should pay attention. When the Prime Minister said there was no pressure whatsoever to answer the Right Honourable Lady's question directly, he was specifically responding to the allegation that there was pressure that Peter Mandelson should not be vetted at all and that he should be sent to Washington regardless of the vetting outcome. Again, Sir Ollie Robbins told MPs it was, and I quote, never put to him in that way, and the Prime Minister made that comment immediately after quoting the evidence provided by the Foreign Affairs Committee. Regrettably, Mr. Speaker, regrettably, and we're seeing it again today after time, the opposition is just trying to expand their interpretation of the Prime Minister's words in bad faith because their previous claim that the Prime Minister must have known about Peter Mandelson's clearance has fallen apart in front of their eyes, and now they are grasping at straws. And this matters, Mr. Speaker, because, as the Honourable Member for Herne Bay and Sandwich argued, the processes in this House, the work of the Privileges Committee, is important. It is integral to our Constitution. But there must be appropriate thresholds for these investigations, not every week off the back of PMQs on an interpretation of the wording of the Prime Minister, but instead on very significant cases that warrant the work of this committee. And that's why it is important, Mr. Speaker, as many members in the House have done today, to contrast the allegations and the accusations of the opposition party today to the seriousness of when Boris Johnson was referred to the Privileges Committee in the last Parliament. This is important precedent, Mr. Speaker, because in those circumstances, Boris Johnson knowingly told this House that there were no parties in Downing Street during COVID lockdowns, only for it to emerge that he'd personally been at 5 of them and received a police fine for attending them. That is the nature of lying to this House, which he was proven to have done in the work of the Privileges Committee. This is not about interpretation of a question and answer at Prime Minister's questions. This begs the question, therefore, Mr. Speaker, if there is no substance to the allegations in the motion today, what is it? What is it that is driving the behaviour of opposition parties on the opposite bench? This question goes to the very basis of the motion before us. So I have to ask, Mr. Speaker, I have to ask, what is it precisely about this Labour government giving rights and powers to workers, to renters, to the disadvantaged that they do not like? What is it, Mr. Speaker, about this Labour government standing against unearned wealth and people who use their privilege to extract value from the system rather than adding to it that they do not like? What is it, Mr. Speaker, about a Labour government raising taxes on private jets and non-doms to raise money for our state schools, our NHS, our police, to lift children out of poverty after years of neglect from the Conservative Party opposite that they do not want to hear? We all know why, Mr. Speaker, because they are on the side of the vested interests and we are on the side of the British people. But Mr. Speaker, to be fair to the House, this is not just an accusation I'm levelling at the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, because they are not the only ones playing games with this motion today. The SNP too. They're desperate to distract from their record in power. 10,000 kids in Scotland without a home to call their own, a Scottish NHS in decline, and the shameful ferries fiasco. What is it that they're trying to distract from today?
I thank him for belatedly giving way. I don't know if he's noticed, but this afternoon polling was released which outlines that 61% of people on these aisles believe that there should be an inquiry in the terms laid out in the vote tonight. Just 20% of the public agree with his position. Why is he once again on the wrong side of public opinion?
I notice, Mr. Speaker, he has nothing to say to those kids, those patients waiting in the NHS line, or the people waiting for his government to perform. And the so-called Green Party, Mr. Speaker, just for me to complete going round the House, a party desperate to distract from Labour's mission for clean energy, from their opposition to clean nuclear power, to quibbling over new solar farms, which, and I literally couldn't make this up, Mr. Speaker, they think are too big. Get real. We are in an energy bills crisis and a climate emergency, and this Labour Party is going to pull out the stops to serve the British people. Mr. Speaker, whilst the parties opposite play...
Order. Please, if he's going to give way, in fairness to Honourable, he's given way once already. You can't stand while the member's speaking. You can indicate, but you can't continue to hang loose like you're trying to summon a taxi. Come on, Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I for one am rather enjoying myself, but I think the public might want to listen to the debate in the House today. Because, Mr. Speaker, whilst the parties opposite, which you can hear from their chuntering and their joking and their shouting, are playing games, this Labour government is doing the work that matters. I've been asked, Mr. Speaker, where is the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister has been chairing this afternoon the Middle East Response Committee, bringing together the government to mitigate the impact of the war on the Middle East. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, the parties opposite want to distract from the fact, after years of ordinary people facing pressures from the cost of living, a feeling like hard work isn't rewarded like it used to be, that they, the Conservative Party and their friends in Reform, wanted the UK to go to war in the Middle East, making it harder for families up and down the country. Distraction, distraction, distraction. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, this government is investing in new rail, roads and nuclear reactors, new scanners for our hospitals, free breakfast clubs for our kids. It is this Labour government that has saved British Steel, investing in sovereign AI, renewing our high streets and delivering homegrown energy. This is relevant, Mr. Speaker, because it goes to the behaviour, the motivation behind the motion today. This Labour government is doing the hard work of building a better Britain, a Britain that gives people hope for a better future. All these opposition parties, they want to tear that down. They want to tear down this Labour government and the Labour movement. And they agree, Mr. Speaker, they agree, because like our forefathers before us, we've stood up to the power of vested interests, and we will do so again. And so I say to the opposition parties today, I say to them all when they come here to try to tear down this Labour movement and our project for the British people, not today, Mr. Speaker, not on our watch. We will not let it happen, and on that basis I commend this statement to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye! Of the contrary, no. No! Division, clear the lobby. The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. The tellers for the ayes, Eric Cross and Gregory Stafford. For the noes, Deirdre Costigan and Nestle Caliscan. Order.
The ayes to the right, 223. The noes to the left, 335.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 223. The noes to the left, 335. The noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock. Can I just say, a member of Parliament's been to complain to me and another member. When other members are shouting shame when they're voting, it is not acceptable and it will not be tolerated. So I hope that the people concerned will apologise to those members that they shouted at. Point of order, Sir Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Out of 190 questions for written answer that I've put down this session, which is coming to its close, all but one have been answered. The one exception is one that I mentioned on the floor of the House yesterday during the Chief Secretary's statement. And he responded that he always ensures that he honours parliamentary questions in a timely fashion. The last day for answering this question is today, and it so far hasn't been answered. So I wonder if I might give the Chief Secretary the opportunity to answer it now. And it is this: to ask who first suggested to the Prime Minister that Peter Mandelson should be appointed as ambassador to the United States.
Just to say, we're not going to carry on the debate, but Secretary Jones is desperate to answer.
Whilst I'm here, Mr. Speaker, first can I apologise to the right honourable gentleman? I would have cleared parliamentary questions, but I've been in the House all afternoon. To answer his specific question, I will refer him to the evidence given today to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee from Mr. Morgan McSweeney, who confirmed that the first person to recommend Peter Mandelson to become ambassador was Peter Mandelson.
Emily Darlington, point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to seek your advice. I understand that it is custom and practice when an MP comes to visit your constituency that you are given due notice of that. The Leader of the Opposition came to my constituency and did not inform me that she was there, and I would like to know if we could how best to resolve this.
I think the good thing is you've told me about it, and what I would say to honourable members, whether the ministers, shadow ministers, leaders, whoever they are, the courtesy is the MP should know, unless it's for a private visit. So please, can everybody take that on board, especially as we're coming up to the election. The fever's already with us, so please adhere to what I believe is good practice. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Pension Schemes Bill, consideration of Lord's message.
Sorry. Now, before we consider the Lord's message on the Pension Scheme Bill, I inform the House that the Government has tabled a new motion in relation to the Lord's message and has withdrawn the motion it tabled this morning. The new amendment paper is available in the Vote Office and online and was issued at 5:55 and includes a note indicating that a motion relating to the Lord's Reason 88X has been withdrawn and the new motion has been tabled. I can confirm that nothing in the Lord's message engages common privilege. Right, we now come to government motion related to the Lord's Reason 88X. As set out on the notice paper, I call Minister Torsten Bell to move. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's obviously disappointing to see that not every member in this chamber prior wishes to stay for a detailed discussion of the Pension Schemes Bill, but it's not the biggest disappointment ever, and it's good to see our regular engagers on this bill in their place. And I want to actually thank particularly those members for helpful discussions on the bill in recent days. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do not intend to detain the House for long. Honourable members will be, that's always the reaction we're looking for, honourable members will be aware that there is one outstanding issue between this House and the other place when it comes to the Pension Schemes Bill. This relates to the reserve power on asset allocation. Today, the Government returns to its previous amendments on this issue. These spell out the intended purpose of the reserve power to underpin the industry's own commitments in the Mansion House Accord and to rule out other uses, such as a focus on any specific asset or asset class. But we are also bringing forward a final set of changes that aim to do justice to the points made in this House and the other place, while retaining the original policy intent. These have three elements. First, a new requirement on regulators, in this case the TPR and the FCA, to make an assessment of barriers to the delivery of private asset investment, including the extent to which those barriers reflect the collective action problem that we have discussed extensively during exchanges on this bill. This assessment would be required to be incorporated into the ex-ante report the Secretary of State must produce before any use of the reserve power that the bill provides for. Our amendment, importantly, also places a duty on the government to have regard to this regulatory assessment before any use of the power. This will ensure a Secretary of State behaving reasonably, as they are required to do, must place weight on the assessment of the regulators on this matter. Now, it was always the government's intent to evaluate progress against the Mansion House Accord commitments in terms of the broad direction of travel over a substantial period of time, rather than short-term movements in private asset exposure. To reinforce this, we also propose to add to the face of the bill that the power cannot be exercised any earlier than 2028. Our second set of changes builds on the saver's interest test to reinforce the central role of trustees and providers. Our amendments in lieu would change the bar required to engage the saver's interest test. Rather than having to demonstrate that meeting the asset allocation requirements would be likely to cause material financial detriment, a scheme would instead have to show that meeting the requirements is likely not to be in the best interests of members. This reflects language regularly used when considering trustees' duties. In addition, we have more tightly specified the regulator's role, confining it to ensuring that the trustee or the provider's own assessment of what is in the best interests of members is reasonable, rather than replacing that assessment with their own. Thirdly, our amendment address worries about the differential treatment of particular investment vehicles by allowing for consideration of direct or indirect holdings in the 6 asset classes named in the Mansion House Accord. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would remind the House that this bill has its roots in much work that was underway for some time in government, but also the commitment in the Labour Party manifesto to ensure workplace pension schemes take advantage of scale and invest in a wider range of productive assets. That was why one of the first things this government did on taking office was to launch a comprehensive review of pensions investment. That review found clear evidence that DC pensions market is operating with an excessively narrow focus on costs to the detriment of saver outcomes. That is where the reserve power comes from. It exists because the review found, and the industry itself has told us, that competitive pressure focused on cost minimisation is the single biggest barrier to diversifying in savers' long-term interest. But, of course, things can change over time, and there are a range of other factors which may come into play, which we have discussed particularly with the member for Wyre Forest. The changes we propose today address that worry directly and others. They require regulators to assess whether these competitive pressures remain a material barrier to more diverse private asset investment before any use of the power. And they put trustees or providers' own assessments of savers' best interest centre stage. And on that basis, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend the government's position to this House.
Right. The question is that this House insists on its disagreement with the Lords in their amendments 15 to 24, 27, 30 to 34, 36, 38 to 42, 83 and 88. Insists on its amendments 88C, 88E to 88P, 88R, 88S and 88W to the words restored to the bill by that disagreement. Does not insist on its amendments 88A, 88T, 88U and 88V to the words so restored to the bill, but proposes amendments A to J to the words so restored to the bill. And I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Helen Whately.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I begin by welcoming the honourable gentleman back to his place. We missed him last night and it is good to see him back in the chamber. Through our many debates, we have broadly agreed on the policy intent behind most of this bill. But as I have said time and time again, agreement on the principles of a bill is not the same as offering the Minister unqualified support for every measure within it, particularly not for the power contained in Clause 40, mandation, the reserve power, as he calls it, the power for ministers to instruct pension funds where to invest. When this bill was first introduced, that mandation power was truly breathtaking in scope. It was extraordinary, an unconstrained power that would have allowed the Secretary of State access to 100% of at least £400 billion worth of auto-enrolment default pension funds. It allowed ministers to direct their investment however they saw fit. And what happened the moment that became clear to people? Well, right honourable members and honourable members opposite, in front, and indeed members behind me, not least Reform UK, were already queuing up with pet projects and struggling sectors they thought savers' money should be used for. Net zero schemes, steel, renationalising water. And to be clear, they were not proposing these on the grounds of the return on investment for savers, the income they would generate people for later life. That much is obvious. But we said no. No to politicians having that power, no to ministers directing pension savings into their pet projects, and no to overriding the interests of savers in favour of politicians desperate for access to capital. I was clear from the outset. This power was dangerous and it had no place in this bill. But after sustained pressure from the industry, from the other place and from this side of the House, the government has slowly, very slowly, been forced to row back. They have rowed back from a power grab that threatened trust in auto-enrolment pensions and risked damaging savers' retirement incomes. And let us be clear about what those concessions amount to. First, on allocation limits. The original bill contained no cap whatsoever on how much of a saver's pension could be mandated into specified assets. Now, after pressure, the government has imposed hard limits. No more than 10% of a default fund may be directed into qualifying assets, and no more than 5% may be directed specifically into UK assets. That is a major retreat from the original proposal. Second, sunset and single-use restrictions. The government has brought forward the expiry date of the reserve power to 2032 if unused, and repealed the whole regime by 2035 unless renewed by fresh primary legislation, and limited the core mandation power so it can only be exercised once. Another retreat. Third, the scope has been narrowed. Mandation can now apply only to the main default auto-enrolment fund, not the entire pension scheme, not every pot. Again, another retreat. And today, we've had further concessions. The government now accepts that before this power can ever be exercised, regulators must conduct an independent assessment of whether a genuine collective action problem exists, whereby no one wants to be the first mover, and whether that problem is inhibiting investment in private markets. We have been consistent in our view that mandation is not the right solution, but we accept that requiring an independent assessment before the power can be exercised is a safeguard against ministerial overreach. And I appreciate the Pension Minister's assurances on the weight of evidence required at the dispatch box. They have also accepted that the reserve power cannot be used before 2028. Again, another retreat. The government has also further strengthened the savers' interest test since yesterday's amendment. Schemes will no longer have to prove that compliance would likely cause material financial detriment. Instead, they need only demonstrate that compliance is likely not to be in the best interests of members, thereby aligning that test with trustees' existing fiduciary duties. This matters because fiduciary duty must be protected. It is sacrosanct. Nothing is more important in a modern pension system than the duty to act solely in the best interest of savers. That duty is the foundation upon which trust in our pension system rests. This amendment means that in a conflict between mandation and fiduciary duty wins. Again, another important retreat. Finally, the government has agreed to remove discrimination between investment vehicles by clarifying that both direct and indirect holdings in the relevant asset classes count towards compliance. The final retreat. Madam Deputy Speaker, every one of those changes tells the same story. The government introduced a power that was too broad, too vague and too dangerous, and step by step, under pressure, they have been forced to narrow it, constrain it and hedge it about with safeguards. Why? Because the original power was indefensible, because the government knew the concerns were real. The work we have done has obliterated the government's original proposal. The mandation power, as it stands now, looks nothing like how it was first imagined. What began as a sweeping ministerial power grab has been stripped back, pared down and boxed in on all sides. Only now, after our intervention, has it become at least palatable. This is a vestige of its former overmighty self, a shrivelled husk. But let me be clear. We do not believe government should direct private capital, and we do not believe ministers should interfere in investment decisions properly left to trustees and markets. Here we have Labour doing what they always do, thinking government is the answer, the state going where it has no place to go. When Conservatives return to government, we will remove mandation from the statute book entirely, because, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the heart of this policy lies a dangerous assumption that ministers in Whitehall know better than trustees, fund managers and markets how to invest the public's pension savings. I have yet to meet anyone who wants a politician managing their pension. And pensions belong to the people who earn them, not government ministers. It is as simple as that.
We have no backbench speeches, so I'll come to Steve Darling if you're ready. The Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And Liberal Democrats have opposed mandation from day one, and we have continued to oppose throughout this bill. The challenge is that once you cross the Rubicon, you have changed the dynamics of pensions significantly. And the crucial thing that pensions need to be is that people need to have confidence that this is a good way of saving for your retirement. And if we undermine that by government interference, then that will reduce people's confidence in actually saving for their pension. And that is a complete reverse of what this bill as a whole is all about, because this bill is mostly about making sure that our pension system is fit for the future, fit to serve those who are looking to have a good retirement. And that is to be celebrated with the vast majority of this bill, and it is to be welcomed. However, as Liberal Democrats, although there have been significant concessions, and we welcome those steps in that right direction, there is still a crossing of a Rubicon, and we continue to have grave concerns.
Would you allow me?
Do come in.
Thank you. The Liberal Democrat spokesman makes an incredibly important point about crossing the Rubicon, with the government taking mandation powers to be able to interfere in people's savings and assets. And we're talking about pension funds here. But once that Rubicon is crossed, actually there's no reason why the government might not feel that they could start mandating investment trusts, other types of saving schemes as well. So this is not only something about pensions, this is about this fundamental relationship between the state and private individuals.
Thank you. And my colleague makes a very powerful point that is well made, and I'm sure the Minister will reflect on that in his wind-ups. So we continue to oppose mandation as Liberal Democrats, and we plan to vote against this tonight. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Wind-ups, Minister Torstenberg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to members for their contributions and for the kind words from the Shadow Secretary of State. I will be brief. The Government has continued to insist on the inclusion of the reserve power in this bill across 4 rounds of discussions in this place, because we have not heard a convincing alternative approach to solving the collective action problem that we have discussed. But we have heard convincing arguments about how this part of the bill can be strengthened, and on each of them we have acted. That is why the amended power is necessary but also constrained. It is capped, time-limited, single-use, sunsetted, subject to savers' interest test that has been materially strengthened, as the Shadow Secretary of State laid out. Madam Deputy Speaker, on that basis, the elected House has now been clear on many occasions. On each occasion, that has been seen by large majorities. And on that basis, it is now clear that this is the time to resolve this and get the bill passed, as the industry and the groups supporting workers and pensioners themselves have repeatedly called for. The government has listened to the arguments from the benches opposite and those expressed in the other place, not only listened but acted on them. But the elected House has also made its position overwhelmingly plain. Given both these points, which are both important, it is clearly time for the unelected House to bring to an end attempts to frustrate the clearly expressed will of this chamber. It is with that, I think, entirely reasonable expectation that I commend the government's amendments and the passage of this bill to the House.
The question is that this House insists on its disagreement with the Lords and their amendments 15 to 24, 27, 30 to 34, 36, 38 to 42, 83 and 88, insists on its amendments 88C, 88E to 88P, 88R, 88S and 88W to the words restored to the bill by that disagreement. Does not insist on its amendments 88A, 88T, 88U and 88V to the words so restored to the bill, but proposes amendments A to J to the words so restored to the bill. As main opinion, say aye. Aye. No. No. Miss Waitley, are you exiting the chamber? Mr. Darling, wonderful. The question is, as on the order papers, may the opinion say aye? Aye. On the contrary, no. No. Tell us for the ayes are Deirdre Castigan and Nessel Caliscan, and tell us for the noes are Katie Lamb and Gregory Stafford. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 158.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 158. So the ayes have it, unlock.
Here, here.
That concludes consideration of the Lord's message on the Pension Schemes Bill. 7 o'clock motion.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. As made in their opinion say aye.
Aye.
Contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Do the front bench wish to shuffle over?
Thank you.
Order, order.
English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, consideration of Lord's message.
Now.
Before we consider the Lord's message to the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, I inform the House that the Government has tabled a new motion in relation to Lord's Reason 123J and has withdrawn the motions it tabled this morning relating to those motions. The motion relating to Lord's Reason 155J is unchanged. The new amendment paper is available in the Votes Office and online and was issued at 6:30 p.m. and includes a note indicating that the paper was issued at 6:30 p.m. and replaces an earlier version. The motion relating to Lord's Reason 123J has been withdrawn and a new motion has been tabled. We will begin with the government motion relating to Lord's Reason 89F as set out on the notice paper, with which it will be convenient to consider all other Lord's amendments, government motions and amendments. I call the Minister to move the motion. Minister,
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am pleased to speak once again on the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. Can I start, Madam Deputy Speaker, by thanking members from across the House for their constructive engagement in getting the bill to this point. And why this bill matters is that if we are to transform our economy, if we're to drive up living standards and deliver better public services in every community, a fundamental change is needed in the way that the country is run. This landmark bill will deliver just that. It represents the biggest transfer of power out of Whitehall to our regions and our communities in a generation. And so I am glad that we have found a way forward on several of the issues we most recently discussed, namely the role of strategic authorities and mayors in rural affairs, agents of change in the planning system, and the role of town and parish councils in neighbourhood governance. We have listened carefully to the concerns raised in both Houses on remaining issues: the ministerial power of direction in Schedule 1 of the bill, prioritising development on brownfield land, and the models of governance in local authorities. This is why the Government has today tabled 3 amendments that I will now outline. On the question of ministerial power of direction in the bill, I remind the House that ensuring every part of England can benefit from devolution remains a key objective of this Government. I repeat for the record that we on this side of the House believe strongly that government has a duty to drive economic growth, unlock investment and deliver better outcomes for our communities. To deny communities that opportunity would be to hold them back. This is why we originally put in place a backstop power of direction for the Secretary of State to use in exceptional circumstances. And I emphasise exceptional circumstances. But to be very clear, the approach that we are taking in practice is to work with local leaders to forge enduring local partnerships and strong local institutions with their consent. However, we have heard the concerns and the strength of feeling from some noble peers about the scope of the powers previously included in Schedule 1. To that end, and in the interest of not delaying the progress of this bill and of ensuring that communities can benefit from the powers that all of us wish to see enacted at the earliest opportunity, the Government is content to remove all powers in Schedule 1 that would allow the Secretary of State to direct the establishment of a strategic authority, whether mayoral or non-mayoral, or to provide directly for a mayor of an existing non-mayoral strategic authority. In addition, I am happy to commit that the government will not seek to use remaining power to direct the addition of a local government area to an existing strategic authority for a period of 4 years following royal consent. It will then remain subject to all the same safeguards that have been discussed at length. As I have said consistently throughout the passage of this bill, our policy and our practice is very, very clear. We are working with local leaders, and we will continue to work with local leaders to develop devolution proposals that command broad support across their area. That collaborative approach will always be our clear preference. The concessions I am making here today put that commitment beyond any doubt. Turning now to the issue of brownfield land. The government considers Lord's Amendment 89B and 89C to be unworkable. They would undermine effective plan making, constrain proper consideration of local circumstances, and introduce inconsistency between spatial development strategies prepared by mayors and strategic authorities and those prepared by other authorities. As I have previously said, national policy remains the most effective route through which planning reform should be pursued, and is the right place to set clear expectations about where development should take place. Where concerns have been expressed about the effectiveness of existing policy, it remains too early to assess the full impact of recent and proposed changes to national planning policy. However, in recognition of the strength of feeling expressed about inappropriately located development, and to further reinforce a brownfield-first approach, the government has tabled its own amendment. This would set a requirement in primary legislation for the Secretary of State to use existing regulation-making powers to ensure that strategic planning authorities have regard to the desirability of prioritising development on land that has been previously developed. This will put consideration of brownfield land on the same legal footing as other highly important issues that are also on the face of legislation, such as promoting sustainable development and the impact on health and health inequalities. It will ensure that the prioritisation of brownfield land is front and centre when strategic planning authorities are producing a spatial development strategy and considering how to meet the growth needs of their area. The drafting of our amendment is consistent with national policy, making clear that prioritising development on brownfield land is an overall objective and clearly desirable. Enshrining this requirement in legislation will elevate its importance and will further solidify the government's clear commitment to a brownfield-first approach. I now turn to the matter of local authority governance. As honourable members will know, the government has set a clear default position. Councils currently operating the committee system and which are not otherwise protected should be required to move to the leader and cabinet model within 1 year of the relevant bill provisions coming into force. That remains the government's firm expectation. However, we have heard concerns from the other place and concerns expressed in this House that requiring a council to move to the leader and cabinet model within a year could potentially create challenges for some councils, their members and officers. For example, where authority has submitted a proposal for a boundary change or merger in response to the Secretary of State's new power to invite such proposals. The government amendment we are bringing forward today responds to those concerns. It allows the Secretary of State to extend the 1-year transition period for non-protected councils by a further year in certain circumstances. This provides flexibility where a council is already on a clear path to dissolution, so that it is not required to undertake a significant governance change that may have little practical benefit. This does not change the government's wider policy on local authority governance reform, but it does provide a proportionate and pragmatic safeguard in response to the points that have been raised over the pace of change. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill has undoubtedly been improved as a result of scrutiny in ping-pong so far, and I thank the noble lords and this place for their contribution in helping us with that. We are pleased to be able to offer concessions on brownfield land, local authority governance and the ministerial power of direction, and I urge the House to support the government's position and to accept these concessions.
The question is that this House insists on its disagreement with the Lords with their amendments 89B and 89C, but proposes amendments A in lieu as on the notice paper. And I call the Shadow Minister, David Simmons.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by expressing and putting on the record my thanks to the Minister and colleagues in her department for the constructive spirit in which they've approached the negotiations around this bill. It remains the view of the official opposition that the overall direction of travel of this bill is a centralising one, that it does bring into effect many new powers for the Secretary of State to direct the work of local authorities, and especially the new mayors and the strategic responsibilities that they undertake will all be subject to a degree of direct influence from Whitehall. However, it clearly is in the interests of all parties represented in this House to seek to reach agreement on those points that have remained in contention. And I know I share the Minister's sense of delight at once again being here at the dispatch box discussing Lord's amendments. And let me just briefly address those in turn. The Minister set out very clearly the government's agreement to step back from some of the directions which were included in that original legislation. And that was an example of one of the points that we felt on this side demonstrated that sense of a centralising power within the legislation. However, government has been, I think, very constructive in the way that they've approached that, has recognised that there is a degree of justification around that backstop power to avoid a situation where the whole of the country is covered by combined authorities, but some councils are left outside of those boundaries. And I know many members have expressed concern in the debates both at Bill Committee and in the House at the impact that that would have, particularly on opportunities for economic development. But let me turn secondly to the amendment around brownfield. Now, members on this side of the House have been resolute from the outset in saying whatever new arrangements the government is determined to implement, we need to ensure that local communities will continue to be able to stand up for and protect the green spaces that they cherish, whether those are greenfield sites that are used for agriculture or whether they are greenfield and greenbelt sites that may be used for leisure to provide that buffer around our cities and our suburbs.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
Of course.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that it is vital that we continue to protect those greenfield sites, as we do in my constituency of Bromley and Biggin Hill, and indeed Conservative councils across the country do? And does he agree with me that it's sad that the Reform candidate for Mayor of London disagrees and wants to build over some of our precious greenbelt land?
David Simmons.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the member for Bromley and Biggin Hill is absolutely spot on in what he says. I think members across this chamber have been quite surprised to hear Reform in particular saying that they wish to tear up London's Greenbelt as part of the local election campaign. And I am grateful to this Minister and to her colleagues that they have recognised, in the fine tradition of many of our Labour councils as well, that we need to make sure that there are sufficient provisions in the legislation to ensure the protection of those vital green spaces for future generations. And I'm grateful in particular for the Minister having made what may seem like a fairly technical change, but as she's just told us at the dispatch box, what it establishes for the first time after 5 rounds of ping-pong is a very clear hierarchy in the legislation that sets out that the new mayors in their spatial development strategy will need to prioritise brownfield land for development. And many of the concerns which members across the House expressed when we debated local government reorganisation just a few weeks ago about the impact of housing targets being displaced will be more effectively managed by the amendments which have been agreed across the House tonight. So that is a distinct step forward from all our perspectives. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll just briefly touch on the point about local authority governance. Now, we recognise that there is a difference of opinion. It is the view of the opposition that local authorities should be able to set up their structure of governance in a way that reflects their local circumstances. And whilst it is strongly our view that the Leader and Cabinet model is the most efficient and effective way to do that, it is the essence of local democracy that people may take decisions that we disagree with. But the government's agreement to pause the use of that requirement so that there will be a period in which local authorities can reflect on their governance arrangements, can consult if they wish to do so, in which the normal cycle of local elections can take place, and in which, of course, there will also be a parliamentary election. And I think we all know that the matter of local government reorganisation never entirely stops. It merely starts again at a different point in each parliamentary cycle. So there will be further opportunities in the future to reflect on that. But all of those do represent, in the context of a bill with which we do still have some significant concerns, progress in a direction that makes us much more comfortable. For those reasons, we do not propose to divide the House on these matters this evening.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll be brief, as most of the arguments have already been well stated. We recognise the Minister's argument yesterday that this bill represents a step forward, not the final destination, and that some consistency is needed to make the system function. But in seeking that consistency, it's really important that we don't lose the very flexibility that makes devolution truly meaningful. We remain supportive of my Lib Dem colleagues in the Lords in their efforts to strengthen the bill. I want to place on record the Liberal Democrats' continued backing for a number of those amendments. On Lords Amendment 36, we return to the central point. It's not devolution to mandate a single model of governance from the centre. Local areas must retain the ability to choose what works for them. I'd like to thank the Minister for concessions she has made from the dispatch box in relation to the amendments Liberal Democrats have tabled. We're grateful the Government has taken note of those issues and the importance of the right of communities to choose their own governance and ensure that choice is better protected. We've already seen why flexibility for local authorities matters. In Sheffield, the Council moved away from the Leader and Cabinet model to a committee system following real concerns about transparency, accountability and council overreach. That change was driven locally by councillors responding to their communities. As my noble friend, Liberal Democrat peer, Lord Mohammed of Tinsley set out in the other place, the consequences of concentration of that power in a small executive can be profound. In Sheffield, decisions to fell thousands of healthy trees, street trees, were driven through by a small group without the scrutiny of a wider number. A plaque now stands in Sheffield which reads, "In recognition of the courageous campaigners who saved thousands of street trees from wrongful felling by Sheffield City Council," as a reminder to all that such failures in leadership must never happen again. This is a stark warning of what can go wrong when power in authorities is too concentrated in the hands of too few. Liberal Democrats will continue to challenge the government on this because we are the party that believes in real community representation and local governance decided by local people. We'll always fight to ensure that communities have a genuine voice in how their areas are run, not decisions handed down from Whitehall. If consistency comes at the cost of local voice, then we are not strengthening devolution, we will be narrowing it. Turning towards Amendment 98, Liberal Democrats believe that placing limits on Secretary of State's powers over structural changes is vital if local democracy is to have genuine autonomy. I'd like to thank the Minister for what she said in relation to that. Likewise, we have sought to remove powers that would allow ministers to direct the creation or expansion of combined authorities, including the imposition of mayors without meaningful local consent. On both sides of these benches and those opposite, we agree that meaningful devolution cannot mean that structures designed in Whitehall and delivered to local areas with limited input, if local cannot mean structures delivered and sent from Whitehall with limited local input. If local government is to have real autonomy, consent must be meaningful and Parliament must retain its proper role. We will continue to work constructively with the government on that front. On Lord's Amendments 89B and 89C, we strongly support prioritisation of brownfield development. That is why Liberal Democrats are grateful to the government for listening to calls for better protection of greenfield land, and that they have taken steps in this bill to encourage prioritisation of brownfield. Going forward, this will help ensure that development is happening in the right places on land that needs to be developed on, and in consultation with communities that surround it. This is not about opposing growth. It's about delivering that growth sustainably and making best use of the land that has already been and previously been developed. Whilst I recognise the Minister's argument that some flexibility is needed to meet housing demand, if that flexibility results in greenfield and green spaces becoming the default, then we will have failed and got the balance fundamentally wrong. Green spaces are essential to community well-being. They support mental and physical health, provide space for recreation and contribute to the identity of local places. Once lost, they cannot be replaced. If brownfield land is not properly prioritised, development pressure will fall on those spaces. We therefore welcome this step in the right direction from the Minister, and we will continue to ask the Government to go further on prioritising brownfield. When taken together, these three amendments do not frustrate the bill, they improve it. They move it closer to what devolution should be, rooted in local consent, and accountable to local communities. We're glad the government has taken heed of the priorities Liberal Democrats put forward, and we will continue to work constructively to ensure decisions are made with local people and not done to them.
Minister, to wind up, Minister Matapambola.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank honourable members for their continued engagement and their insightful debate on these issues. In the time left, I will respond to some of the particular points that was made. I do want to put on record my thanks to opposition members for the constructive way in which they have approached this so that we can progress this bill and take it forward. To the member for Islip, Northwood and Pinner, we will continue to disagree on whether this is a centralising bill or a radical shift in power. I still fundamentally believe that this is a huge step in transferring power outside of Whitehall, but candidly, we will demonstrate this through our actions and through the impact of the bill. The thing that drives us is the impact that this will have in our communities, and I think we have got strong measures that will help us ensure that we are putting communities in the driving seat so that they can shape their place. To the member of Taunton and Wellington, I hear the points that he's made on local government governance in particular. The example of Sheffield that he's raised is one that many of my honourable friends on this side of the bench have advocated and been very clear and advocated for their communities on their behalf, which is why we made the original concession. We think that we have found the right balance. What I would say is that we are clear that if we are to empower local authorities in the way that we want, they need strong governance in order to make decisions for their communities that will impact on their communities. And the reason why we are trying to support the shift in governance arrangements is to ensure that we have enduring local authorities that can fundamentally deliver. And we think that we have achieved this in the concessions that have been made. Madam Deputy Speaker, to conclude, look, the thing that I have found hugely heartening throughout the passage of this bill is that there is a clear point of consensus across the House that if we are to deliver change in our communities, we must push power out into our communities, into the hands of our local leaders, into our neighbourhoods, and to people who know their patch best. And I hope that this bill represents the start of a journey that will fundamentally change the way that government works and how we in this place serve the communities that we are here to represent, where the principle of devolution by default, underpinned by a clear framework, is locked in, where local leaders are empowered to drive economic change and improvements in living standards across their patch, where communities are put in the driving seat and given power to shape the places in which they live and work. I've been clear throughout the passage of this bill that this represents a flaw, not the summit of our ambition for devolution. So I look forward to working with my honourable friends on this side of the House, but with honourable members across the House as we build on the provisions in this bill. Finally, I'd like to thank my brilliant team of officials that have worked on this bill. Hannah, Carrie, Guy, Jenna, Marie, Alice, John, Rachel, Wendy, as well as my private office, Molly, Simon and Lucy, who have all done an absolutely heroic job in taking through an absolutely mammoth bill through the House. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to commend the government's amendment to this House.
The question is, this House insists on its disagreement with the Lords with their amendments 89B and 89C, but proposes Amendment A in lieu as on the notice paper. As may in that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion that this House insists on its disagreement with the Lords Amendment 36, 90 and 155, insists on its amendments 155A to 155F and 155H to the words so restored to the bill by that disagreement with Amendment 155 and proposes Amendment A to the words so restored to the bill as on the notice paper. Minister to move formally. The question is that this House insists on its disagreement with the Lords Amendments 36, 90 and 155. Insists on its amendments 155A to 155F and 155H to the words "so restored to the bill by that disagreement with Amendment 155," and proposes Amendment A to the words "so restored to the bill" as on the notice paper. As may in the opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary no. Aye, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion to insist on disagreement with the Lords in their amendments 85, 86, 97, 216, 120 and 121 and 123. It sits on its amendments to 123C to 123H and 123J to 123K in lieu, and to propose amendments A to E in lieu as on the notice paper. I call the Minister to move the motion formally. The question is that this House insists on disagreement with the Lords in their amendments 85, 86, 97 to 116, 120, 121 and 123. Insists on its amendments 123C to 123H and 123J to 123K in lieu, and proposes amendments A to E in lieu as on the notice paper. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. No. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. That concludes consideration of the Lord's message on the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. A point of order, Michael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week I tabled a written question to the Foreign Secretary asking whether Jonathan Powell was subject to scrutiny vetting before or after he was appointed as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy on the Chagos negotiations. I have not yet received a response. Given that Morgan McSweeney appeared to tell the Foreign Affairs Select Committee this morning that the vetting process only began after Powell was later appointed as National Security Advisor, how can I secure an official answer from the Foreign Office to this basic question before Parliament prorogues?
I know that the honourable member is diligent in getting answers on behalf of his constituents and will no doubt explore every avenue to get that answer. And for the Treasury front bench, it is only appropriate that backbench MPs are able to get responses in due time on behalf of their constituents. No doubt they have heard, and no doubt the honourable member has got his words on the record. If the front benches wish to shuffle over, this is the time to do so. I now come to motion number 5 on income tax, and it would leave the House to take them collectively. Motion number 5 on income tax, retained EU law reform.
You can see from everyone re-entering the chamber now that they've done some minor bills. We're going to get the result on the one we're here for. So let's see. The Prime Minister's been found to have misled Parliament. It's a big deal if this goes through. We'll see. It's going to take quite a few Labour MPs to vote against the government for that to be the case, so it probably won't pass, but every one of those MPs is going to be on notice after this with their constituents. So quite a few will vote against the government, but we'll see if it's enough. Let me know what you think, but I don't know. I don't think it'll be enough. It might be close. It should be close, but the majority won't vote against him. From his own side, anyway.
Order.
The ayes to the right, 308. The noes to the left, 81.
The ayes to the right were 308. The noes to the left were 81. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlocked. We now come to motion number 11 on immigration and asylum. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion to say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
Aye.
Division, clear the lobby. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Tellers for the ayes, Nezel Kaliskan, Deirdre Costigan. Tellers for the noes, Kirsty Blackman, Graham Ledbetter. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 304. The noes to the left, 28.
The ayes to the right were 304, the noes to the left were 28. So the ayes have it, unlocked. Motions number 12 on land, motion number 13 on electricity, motion number 14 on tribunals and inquiries, motion number 15 on excise. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to motion number 16 on business of the House today. Minister to move. The question is the business of the House today motion as on the order paper. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to motion number 17 on select committee statements, with which it will be convenient to consider motions 18 to 21 on the backbench business committee and select committee chair elections. I call the Minister to move. Shadow Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I brought forward a number of motions today in order to facilitate recent recommendations of both the backbench business committee and the procedure committee. I thank both committees for their recent reports on these matters, and I will briefly address each motion. Honourable members should note that the explanatory notes are also available in the vote office. First, select committee statements. Currently, for a select committee statement to be made, it must be made within 5 sitting days of publication of the report or announcement of the inquiry. The Backbench Business Committee recommended in its 15th anniversary report that the Select Committee statements under Standing Order number 22D should instead be allowed to take place 10 sitting days after publication of the report or announcement of an inquiry. Select Committee statements have increased in popularity in recent years, and the Government agreed with the Committee in their recommendation, and therefore the motion asks the House to amend the Standing Order to enact this change. Madam Deputy Speaker, turning to the motions relating to the operation of the Backbench Business Committee, both the Backbench Business Committee in its 15th anniversary report and the Procedure Committee in its report on elections in the House of Commons proposed that members and chair of the Backbench Business Committee should be elected in line with all other elected select committees, that is, for the whole Parliament rather than each session. While the Backbench Business Committee does have unique powers in scheduling business on the floor of the House, the Government recognises that the operation of the committee is well established and that the reappointment of the committee at the beginning of each session can cause delays to the scheduling of backbench business. The Government therefore has accepted this recommendation, and the relevant motions bring forward proposals to make this change ahead of the next session with a few consequential changes. The Government proposes, as far as possible, alignment of nomination periods and ballot timings for the Backbench Business Committee to that of other Select Committee chairs. No other arrangements relating to the election of the Backbench Committee chair, for example, signature required for candidates or parties eligible to stand for chair, have been amended. However, as the current chair and members have only been appointed on a sessional basis, the committee is still required to be re-elected at the beginning of the next session to allow the chair and members to be appointed for the remainder of this Parliament. As ever, the Government will endeavour to ensure that the committee can be re-established in good time in the new parliamentary session. A further motion has been tabled which sets out the arrangements for the election of the chair and the appointment of committee members at the beginning of the next session to ensure clarity of the arrangements for setting up the committee in the transition session. Madam Deputy Speaker, the final motion in this group relates to Select Committee chair elections and follows the recent report from the Procedure Committee. Their inquiry recommended that rules be adopted for Select Committee chair elections to limit campaigning activity and the time that campaigning can take place. Paragraphs 109 to 111 and 114 to 115 of the committee's report set out how the rules should be adhered to. The Government accepts the committee's recommendation and the motion asks the House to endorse these rules. I thank the Backbench Business Committee and the Procedure Committee for their consideration of these matters, and I look forward to continuing to work with them across a number of areas, both as leaders of the House of Commons but also as Chair of the Modernisation Committee. I hope members will support these motions today and I commend them to the House.
The question is motion number 17 on select committee statements as on the order paper. And I call Shadow Minister Joy Morrissey.
Thank you. And may I echo the words of our Leader of the House and to thank the Backbench Business Committee and the Procedure Committee for contributing to these motions today. And they're widely very sensible.
I call Chair of the Procedure Committee, Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to follow a previous member of the Procedure Committee. I thank the Honourable Lady for all her work that she did in contributing to the work of this committee, which came to a very clear view, very consensual view across the committee, that the elections that we saw in the House for select committee chairs at the beginning of this session of Parliament did somewhat resemble a silly season with excessive campaigning, and for newer members of the House who perhaps maybe didn't even expect to be in this House, they found it very overwhelming, and we were able to take that information and put together a very sensible set of rules that create a level playing field for all candidates whilst respecting the right for members to have be able to open their office door without falling over a pile of leaflets, frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, which was one of the things that was fed to us as a committee as one of the problems last time. And I hope that the change to the election of the chair of the Backbench Business Committee to be in line with other select committee chairs will be able to bring that in line and shows the Backbench Business Committee is a select committee in the same way as other select committees are in this House. So I'd like to thank the Leader of the House for bringing this forward and accepting the committee's findings in full, and I look forward to supporting them. Thank you.
I call the Chair of the Backbench Business Committee.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the Leader of the House for listening to the Backbench Business Committee and the Procedure Committee and bringing forward these long overdue amendments. I have to say, when the Backbench Business Committee was inaugurated, when I was first elected to this House in 2010, the Government of the day refused to listen to those on the backbenches who said, why is this position having to be elected every session? Unfortunately, what had happened, of course, was, if I can put it politely, members of the awkward squad managed to get elected to the committee and cause the Government of the day immense problems. However, I suspect that the government now sees that their power within the Parliamentary Labour Party to control.
We'll leave it there. Obviously, the Prime Minister won his vote earlier, which we knew he would. But even if it's not a cover-up, he's made this look like a cover-up, which is a bit ridiculous. But thanks for tuning